Sentire Media.
Well, hello there, and welcome back to another episode of New Life in Italy. I'm your host, Samantha Wilson, and today's episode is a big one, especially in today's world where markets are unstable and currency rates are kind of jumping all over the place, and our money has to stretch just a little bit further. So today we are going to talk about how much it really costs to live in Italy, because I think it might surprise you. Now, look, I get it. Italy has this romantic reputation, and in some ways, I think it's a bit of a myth that it is super affordable. Yes, you can get a massive panino sandwich for, €5, or chase it down with a Euro espresso. And let's not forget those dreamy little hilltop towns where all these big Instagram accounts show you how you can buy this amazing home for, less than a used car. But is that real? Is it sustainable? And can you actually afford to live here long term? In this episode, we are diving into all of this and more. We're going to talk about the costs, the rents, utilities, groceries, healthcare, and, everything that you need to understand the real cost of living in Italy. I'm also going to share tips on where you can actually save money, where you should splurge, and how to stretch your euros without sacrificing your lifestyle. So whether you're planning your move or just dreaming from afar, this one's for you. Let's get into it. I'm Samantha Wilson, Chief Dream Maker at smartmoveitaly.com, and this is A New Life in Italy, a show where each week I take you behind the scenes of what it's really like to move to Italy, introduce you to some fascinating people, answer your questions, and show you how starting a new life in Bel Paese is possible for you. This might be the most important thing I say in this whole episode, so lean in. Living in Italy is not the same as when you were here on vacation. Now, I know this sounds obvious, but when we're talking about how much it costs to live here, this is important to remember. Long lunches, olive groves, charming piazzas, all of that is very dreamy, and I'm not here to crush that dream, but I am here to add some real talk. That blissful week that you spent in Puglia sipping Aperol Spritz, lounging around your agriturismo, maybe it was less than you thought it would cost. Or maybe you stayed in a little cute B&B and had this amazing long lunch for only €35. You didn't really think twice about that money because you were on holiday. That is vacation Italy. It's curated, it's lovely, and it's designed to feel easy. But real life in Italy, that's something entirely different. Because when you live here, you are not paying for the week, you are paying for the system. You're part of the bureaucracy now. That means that you deal with things that you didn't see on your trip. Like you pay taxes, and not always low, and on your worldwide income. You will pay for your utilities, and they can be high, especially if you love your heating in the winter or your air conditioning in August. You will register your garbage collection, pay for how many people live in the house, and you'll learn the joy of the infamous bolletta, which are the bills which come irregularly and sometimes they make no sense at all. And let's not forget that you'll be shopping for your own dish soap, doing your own laundry, and cooking your own meals. In other words, paying for, your life. And I say this not to scare you, but to prepare you, because this is where a lot of people get tripped up. They budget for life in Italy the way that they experienced it as a visitor. And that's just not realistic. Living here full-time comes with real life expenses, unexpected costs, and yes, a whole lot of bureaucracy. But here's the thing. It's also very worth it. And even with all of the unknowns that you're going to face, the average cost of living in Italy is probably less than where you are living now. And if you're earning wages from your home country outside of Italy, then actually you can live quite well here. So let's start with the most important expense and the one that will usually take the biggest bite out of your budget, and that's housing. Just like back in your home country, housing will probably be your biggest monthly expense. And it's also where most people get a little bit starry-eyed and trip up on their planning. Let's start with buying, because I know that many of you think that it's super cheap to buy property in Italy, and if you were to compare to many cities in North America, you would probably be right. So what you can get in Italy versus, say, San Francisco or Vancouver is startling. So much so, many people actually consider moving simply because of the lower cost of housing here. But there's other things to consider. Even though the prices are lower than expected, you still get what you pay for here. It's easy to scroll through those real estate websites and spot this beautiful little stone house for 40 grand and think, oh my goodness, that's it. I'm moving to Italy. I can buy that. But here's the reality behind those listings. That 40,000 euro home, well, it's probably in a remote village, maybe no cafe, no transportation, no train for sure. And the nearest supermarket might be 20 minutes away. And there's probably very little infrastructure. It likely needs a full renovation. Think roof and plumbing, electrical, kitchen, windows, everything. And that's not cheap or fast here. Even if you're handy, DIY is not the same in Italy. There are very strict building and renovation rules, different equipment and systems. And if you don't speak Italian, shopping for the right supplies will be a nightmare. Now, the heating system may be non-functioning or it could be super old. And even if it looks move-in ready, it might not be legal, therefore not qualifying for a residential address for perhaps a visa. In fact, we had one client who bought what he thought was this gorgeous, cute little cheap apartment in Sicily, later to learn that it was actually a garage and not legal to use as a home. And let's not forget that most rural homes weren't built with modern comforts in mind, like air conditioning, insulation. All of those things are probably not part of this 40,000 euro property. So yes, can you buy something for 40 grand? Yes, but you need to factor in the cost of making it livable and likely legal. Now that said, if you're handy or you want a slow renovation project, then these places can still be made amazing, but they're not going to be 40,000 euros at the end of the day. They're going to double or triple or quadruple that price. Now let's talk about the cost of renting. Because if you're not ready to buy, which I actually recommend for most people in the beginning, renting gives you this flexibility and it's a softer landing when you explore your new life here in Italy. But it can be costly now. So in big cities like Milan or Florence or Rome, you're looking at about 1,200 to 1,500 euros per month for an average furnished one-bedroom apartment in kind of a decent area. Now, this has gone up substantially over the years, and it will likely continue to increase. If you're open to smaller towns or villages or areas outside of these city centers, you can save some money. Normally about maybe 700 to 1,000 euros a month is more typical for a one-bedroom average furnished apartment. Now, if you want to live on the coast, which most people do, and or in a touristy area like parts of Tuscany or Amalfi or even up in Lake Como, these can carry pretty high price tags, even for small places. And actually, the availability for rentals there are pretty low, so they can, again, ask a premium. But here's the thing. Italian rentals come with a lot of upfront costs, so you have to budget for that. Most landlords will require at least 3 months security deposit, sometimes rental insurance, and then you will always have an agency fee, which is often 1 or sometimes 2 months rent, or a percentage of the yearly rental amount. In some cases, that could be up to 15% of the total yearly rental amount will be what you pay in commission. So we're talking about 5 months worth of rent due up front just to move in. So for example, if your rent is $1,000 a month, you're easily shelling out $5,000 before even unpacking a single box. As a renter, you're also responsible for the maintenance costs and garbage tax. This is usually quite surprising to foreigners because you don't call the landlord to fix a squeaky window or a broken door or an oven that stopped working. In fact, you have to fix that yourself. The landlord will only be responsible for major repairs like plumbing, and I don't mean a plugged toilet, I mean major plumbing issues or roofing issues, these kinds of things. Don't expect any maintenance whatsoever from your landlord. You will have to fix it yourself and pay for it yourself. You will also need to budget and pay for the annual Caldaia check, which is a check for your gas water heater. It's about 150 euros a year and it's mandated by law. Also, the garbage tax is paid by the renter. This is called tari. And it's a tax based on the number of people that live in the house, and it's your responsibility as a renter. And also, you pay it once a year. Now, in addition, you will pay the utilities because they're almost never included with rent, and they can be kind of shocking. So let's take a minute and break down what you can expect to pay for utilities in this average home in Italy. First of all, the utilities are usually gas, electricity, and water. And depending on where you live, this amount can vary. For example, in Sardinia, water is like champagne. It's very expensive, where in other areas you might be part of just a city water system and it's pretty affordable. So you have to also understand that where you live can impact this budget. So you can expect around 150 to 300 euros a month, depending, of course, on where you live and the size of your home and the season. So winter heating bills, of course, will be higher, and they can be shocking to a lot of foreigners, especially in older homes. You know, gas is how we normally heat our places here, and it can be very, very expensive. Mostly this can be corrected with being just a little more mindful of not leaving the windows open when you have the heat on, which tends to be a bit of a foreigner habit, or turning off the lights, but expect the utilities to be higher than what you might be used to. Now, to be clear, it isn't really just the gas or the electric rates that are what makes it expensive. It's the delivery fees and the tax. As a matter of fact, the tax on tax. So many times your gas, let's say your gas costs 100 euros a month. The tax and the delivery fees they could be in excess of 110, so over double of what the actual use of the utility costs. The taxes and the delivery fees make a huge impact on your service. Now, what about groceries, and what about food, and what about dining out? Those kinds of things actually are quite affordable in Italy, and in my opinion, those are really important things for a good quality of life. So groceries are super affordable compared to North America, and you can shop local markets and eat pretty well on, about under 300 a month per person. So that's pretty good when you think of going to a Safeway in North America. I mean, to get $300 worth of groceries, you'll maybe get a bag and a half. Dining out, an espresso should be between $1 and $1.50. Don't think about the ones that you might have paid for in a big piazza in Venice. It actually should be around €1 or €1.50 for a coffee. And a nice pizza dinner with wine, well, about 20 euros for one person. Of course, you can spend more than that, but if you're on a budget, eating is not the costly part of life here. In fact, it's one of the perks. Now, there's also internet and phone costs, which is a bonus here, because I know in North America you could spend well over $100, $200 a month just to have your internet and your cable and your phone. Well, here it's only about $30 a month or 30 euros a month for fast internet, or 10 or 15 euros a month for your phone. So it's a huge savings compared to your home country. And then if we talk about another big expense, which is healthcare, for a lot of people coming from the US, this is a massive monthly expense to cover your health costs in your home country. In Italy, it's actually quite affordable. If you are Italian, it's free, or you're married to an Italian living here, it's also free. But if you're here on a visa or here from another European country, then you will pay to join the national health system here. And it's a minimum of 2,000 euros a year per person, which compared to other insurance in other countries is pretty peanuts, because it covers everything. I mean, this is all of your doctors, all of your medication, all of your tests, even if you had to have surgery, all of that is completely covered with this one fee. It's an annual fee, and it goes from January to December. And you will have to pay a few other little things like tests. These are just a few, we call them tickets. And these are just little, 10 euros, 15 euros here and there that you'll have to pay. Now, if you're working, if you have a work contract, or you're maybe a digital nomad and you have your own little business, all of your taxes that you're paying, your social dues that you're paying through your income will actually cover the healthcare. So this 2,000 euro fee is not applied. Now, all of these things that I talk about vary. It depends on where you live. It depends on how you live, of course. And Italy isn't a one-price-fits-all country. Your cost of living varies significantly depending on your region. So I want to give you just a general idea of how to plan in your budget. And this is, of course, just thinking that you're an average person living in an average way, not splurging or living very low on a budget. Let's start with northern Italy. These are higher budget areas, so it's more expensive to live in the north. So I'm talking, regions like Lombardy, Trentino, Veneto, Piemonte, Liguria, Emilia-Romagna, these areas, cities like Milan, Turin, Verona, Bologna, Genoa, these are all northern cities and tend to be a little bit more expensive. So a one-bedroom rental will be at the top of this scale, maybe up to 1,800 or 2,000 euros a month inside the city center. Your utilities will be around 200 or 300 a month. Expect to spend a little bit more of heat in the wintertime because it does get colder. And your groceries and your dining, because you're in a city, it's going to be a little bit more expensive, but you can poke around and find more affordable options. But overall, it's going to be a little bit more expensive. And if you're living in a touristy area, we have some clients who live up in Venice, and they were complaining that it's always expensive there, of course, because there's tourist prices. So when you're choosing where you're living, think about these factors that will impact your budget. The lifestyle generally, though, I mean, again, you get what you pay for. So it's going to cost you more to live in these areas that are more serviced. They're more international. They have more things to offer. All of this stuff costs money. I suggest you budget at least 3,000 euros a month after tax per person if you want to live comfortably in one of these cities in the north. So let's go down into the central Italy, which is more mid-range. So this is Tuscany, Umbria, Marche, Lazio, cities like Florence, Rome, Siena, Perugia, these kinds of cities. A one-bedroom apartment will be a little bit lower than the north, but again, in the center of the cities, it's more expensive. So you'll be looking at spending about 1,200 euros-ish a month for an apartment in a smaller town, maybe 700 to 1,200 in a small town. But you could double that if you want to live in the middle of Rome or Florence, for example. Your utilities about 150 to 200 a month on average. Again, depends on the kind of house you're living in. Air conditioning will be high because it gets hot in these cities in the summertime. Groceries and dining, it depends, again, on how you want to eat. There's a mix of affordable or luxury options, of course. Even in big cities, you can find some very affordable ways to eat. A lot of times there's these, sandwich shops or just antipasto kind of places that you can get really affordable food, really delicious food at a very, very good price. You don't have to eat in the most touristy restaurants and pay those high prices, even though you're living in a big city. And the lifestyle in the center, again, you get what you pay for. There's this really nice balance in central Italy where it's not super expensive up in the north, but you get this nice balance between city life, slower pace, and a little bit lower budget. So I would recommend that you budget around 2,500, maybe 3,000 a month for a good quality of life in central Italy, and even less than that if you're living in the countryside. Now, if you want to live in the southern Italy, if you are more budget conscious, these are the places to live. So Puglia, Calabria, Sicily, Basilicata, Campania, not the Amalfi Coast, Campania, but, other areas. So think of cities like Lecce, Bari, Palermo, Catania, these kinds of areas, and these cities are in the south, so they're much more affordable. Now, there's a reason for that. Maybe they're not as easily serviced as central or north, but your rents are much better. You could pay, 600, 800 a month for a nice one bedroom in a smaller town outside of these cities. Utilities are even less, and you're not going to need the heat, of course, in the wintertime, but you will need more air conditioning, so it kind of balances itself off. Now, where you really save down here is on your food. So food in the south is super cheap. It's super fresh and delicious and really is peanuts. You can eat like a king for nothing in the south. And this is one of the best bonuses down there. Now, lifestyle, again, it's slower pace, it's warmer weather. You get what you pay for, so you might not have all of the services that you would in the center or the north. But there's a trade-off. So it's a little bit cheaper to live, a different type of a lifestyle that you can be used to. So I suggest that you budget about 1,500, maybe 2,000 a month for a pretty comfortable lifestyle in the south. It's not very much. Now, not only will the region impact your budget, but also the type of property. So always keep this in mind. Apartments are always cheaper to operate, and in most cases, there's no condo fee, unless, of course, you're living in a city where maybe there's a doorman. Farmhouses, although dreamy and most people's dreams, they can be very expensive to operate, especially to heat. Sometimes they can cost you thousands of euros every month in the winter just to heat these farmhouses. Plus, these old buildings need constant love, attention, and a lot of money. So if this is your dream, be prepared to spend a lot of time and money at the local Obi, which is like a Home Depot. Now, although there are many choices in Italy, just like your home country, living here doesn't mean that you have to live extravagantly. You can if you want to and you have the budget for it, but it doesn't mean you have to. It does mean that you have to learn when to go full dolce vita and when to pull back and live like a savvy local. So here's how I suggest that you can balance your budget without giving up all the good stuff. Here's where you can save. Save by using public transportation over owning a car. Now, if you're living in a city, this is a must anyway. You don't need a car. In fact, it'll be a nightmare for you. Traffic is intense. Parking is almost impossible. And there's a lot of ZTL zones, which are restricted traffic areas, which will leave you with a lot of tickets, probably. So it's always better if you're living in a city to think about public transportation. And in fact, most foreigners really never get around to changing their driver's license over. So eventually they'll have to resort to public transportation. And usually they find a lot of freedom in using, the train system or public transport, both being really affordable and super convenient. I think a monthly bus pass is like 35, 55 euros. And if you compare that to car insurance and gas and maintenance and parking, well, you're going to thank yourself for using it. So one way to save, use public transportation over your own car. The second, although food is cheaper, you can even do better. So if you shop at local markets over supermarkets, you can really save. Now, some of the cities have some great conveniences like home delivery, but you will pay for that. Markets are always the better way to shop because they're not just prettier, they're cheaper and they're fresher. So for produce and cheese and olive oil and bread, go to your neighborhood mercato. Or if you're in the countryside, stop and shop directly from the supplier. You'll save not only money, but you'll eat seasonal and probably make a bunch of friends along the way. Now, what you're drinking, Italian wines, of course, this one is pure magic because you can get incredible wine here for, under €5. What you might have spent $20, $30, $40 for in your home country, it's super cheap here. And you can shop at your local enoteca or go direct to the vineyard and just stock up. You don't need to buy the very expensive bottle of Brunello in order to have some really great wine here. Even the table wine served at your local trattoria can be really surprisingly good. And if you love to eat out, I suggest thinking about lunch because it's kind of a local secret. Pranzo, which is also lunch, is where all of the deals are. And there's a lot of places that offer this fixed menu, which is like a set menu that includes like a pasta, maybe a salad, a side, and sometimes even wine or coffee. And it's often like under €20, sometimes around €15. In fact, there was this little place in our neighborhood who just closed, which I was devastated. And we used to go there for this, their lunch, their pranzo there, and we could get a huge plate of amazing handmade pasta with a salad, like a little quarter of red wine, water, and coffee. And it was €15 a person. And that's in the middle of Florence. So there are options. You just have to know where to look. So that's how you can save. So let's talk about where you can splurge. And I suggest, even though I say heating can be quite expensive, I suggest that you don't skimp here. So always understand that you will have to pay more for your heating certain times of the year here. Trying to save €20 by freezing all winter isn't sustainable, and it does get cold here. I promise you. These homes with these big stone walls might be gorgeous, but coming from a Canadian, it gets cold here. So budget for the heating in the winter. If you're on a budget, you might have to cut some other things out in the year because you should plan on splurging a little bit and spending more to stay comfortable from like October to March. The other way I say you should splurge is on travel. Italy is, of course, an amazing place to live. And there's 20 or different regions to discover, but sometimes you might want a little bit of a glam. You might want to go someplace different. You might want to go to Paris for the weekend or do a cultural dive in Prague. Living in Italy means that you can easily and very affordably travel to all of these countries. And there's a lot of low-cost airlines that operate from most of the cities across Italy to these destinations in Spain or Greece or France or Germany or even further. And sometimes they're as low as €20, even €9 sometimes each way. So for, €20 or €40, you can go get an Airbnb, spend Easter in Paris, or go to a Christmas market in Vienna in the winter. The cost of travel is extremely affordable here. And I encourage you to splurge at least a few times a year exploring the rest of Europe. And then also I want you to think about renovations. If you are buying a home or even fixing up a rental, DIY the painting, but hire and pay for everything else. Someone who you just know that does a little tile work, I promise you will cost you more in the long run. So hire licensed professionals, especially for plumbing, electric, and of course, obviously all your roof work. Get a geometra that understands local regulations, and trust me, the cost to fix a problem later will be far more than the savings you might feel at the beginning. And also spend the money on insulation, good windows, good doors, not for security, but to keep that cold air out in the winter and the cool air in the summer. I promise you are going to thank me later when you do that. Now, if you're a shopper and love a good sale, you should know that along with everything else, sale season is also regulated in Italy. Twice a year, the government dictates when the sales start and end for every region in Italy. In fact, there's a website that tracks them, and I've put it in the show notes for you. Now, during these seasons, Italians go into full-blown shopping mode. And these aren't just a few racks on sale like you might see in the US. These are massive government-sanctioned markdowns. The start and end dates vary from region to region, but basically the winter sales begin in early January and summer sales begin in early July. Discounts can start about 30 to 40% off, but by week 2 or 3, they can go as deep as 70 or 80% off if you're willing to dig. And you will find everything on sale, from Italian leather to housewares, everything at half price or even more. But be mindful of the end dates. And I remember years ago, I had no idea about these sales. And I found this amazing credenza for 50% off, but like an idiot, I didn't buy it. And I lost sleep over it. So when I went back the next day, that sale had ended and it was back at full price. And the store owner was absolutely not willing to sell it at yesterday's discount because the sale was over. So it was a hard lesson learned. So remember to watch for the end dates. All right, so there you have it. Living in Italy can be affordable, but only if you go in with open eyes and a well-built plan. And don't believe every €1 house headline or Instagram reel, because the real Dolce Vita, it's lived in the everyday moments, but only if you plan for them. Making the transition to your new life in Italy and doing it without financial pressure should be your goal. And it is possible if you remain realistic about your plans and budget with intention. It's time for listener questions. Just like the old radio call-in shows, my team has picked 3 listener questions, all left on our voicemail. I have no idea what these questions are, but I haven't been stumped yet. Are you ready? Let's get started. Question number 1. Is it really cheaper to live in southern Italy? And the answer is yes, it is cheaper to live in southern Italy in everything. Buying houses, renting property, the food, everything that you do in the south is at a lower price. But as I said earlier, it does come with negatives. You get what you pay for. And in the south, there isn't a lot of services, or there are services, but they're not as developed as they might be in the north, because there's simply just not as many people down there. The tax, income tax brackets are lower, so therefore the money isn't funneled back into the southern regions. So there's reasons that things are a little bit cheaper, there's less money down there. But certainly if you are on a budget, or you want to live, or you like to live more frugally, definitely move to the south, or look at everything south of Abruzzo. So anything south of Abruzzo, you will get better pricing. But please be mindful that coming with those lower prices also comes with a lack of services and maybe not as comfortable of a life as what you would have in the north. Question number 2, can I live in Italy on €2,000 a month? Yes, absolutely you can. And this is, this number might be changing a little bit in the last few years because things are progressively getting more expensive, as they are all over the world. But if you're careful, you can certainly live on €2,000 a month in most parts of Italy after maybe you've paid your rent, or if you're living in a very small place with a very low rent. Living in a city, including rent, at $2,000 a month is a bit of a push for central Italy, and obviously probably not enough for northern Italy. But certainly in the South, $2,000 a month, including your rent and your food and your wine and all of your entertainment, is definitely doable. Question number 3, what is the biggest surprise expense when moving to Italy? Well, this depends on how much preparation people take, but my experience has been that most people are mostly surprised at the cost of utilities and maybe the cost of some of the more conveniences that we might be used to in North America. So I already spoke about in this podcast about the cost of heating, but it can be really surprising in some of the homes. And I know when we first moved here in our farmhouse, I think before we changed from gas heating, which was GPL because it was out like propane because it was out in the country, and we changed to a big pellet heating system because it was much more affordable later. And that's because our first year's bill was over 5,000 euros for the first month and a half of winter. So that was a super huge shock. But we learned that there's ways that you can save on your heating, even just by changing your heating system can save significantly. In fact, when we changed our system over, our heating went from, I think the full winter season that year was around $7,000. And then it went down to just over 1,000 euros. So a massive, massive savings by changing from GPL to a pellet system. So there's things you can do about it. So heating certainly is a big surprise. But the other thing I think that people are super surprised about is how inexpensive it is really to do the things that you love to do and probably the things that made you move to Italy. Living here can be like living in a museum. If you're living in Florence, it's like an outdoor free museum. Everywhere you look is history, and most of the places that you live or you want to go see, if you live here, you can get in for free on weekends or one Sunday a month. For example, in Florence, you can go to a lot of the museums for free. But all of the great things like, art and food and entertainment and festivals, these are all free to go to. So I think that people don't realize that the amount of money they spend to keep themselves entertained in their home country is significant. And what you do not spend here is a big shock to them, how they can really be entertained and enjoy their lifestyle with very, very little money. Well, that's all for this week's episode. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions about visas, citizenship, property, and really anything about moving to Italy that you would like me to answer in an upcoming episode, please feel free to send us a voicemail at our website at smartmoveitaly.com/podcast, or just click on the links in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and remember, you can find all of the resources and the links to the people and the places that I mentioned in this episode inside the show notes. Ciao for now. A New Life in Italy podcast is a production of Sentire Media, created and hosted by me, Samantha Wilson. Production by London Nero, and with special thanks to Ali Frothingham, Sofia Pisana, and the entire team at Sentire. Follow A New Life in Italy wherever you get your podcasts. And hey, if you're thinking of moving to Italy, whether full-time, part-time, or for a lifetime, come and see me over at smartmoveitaly.com and we'll help you get here and start living your best life. And don't forget, if you love this episode, please rate and leave a review. It's much appreciated. I can't wait to meet up with you again next week, same time, same place. Ciao for now.
Sentire Media.
Hey, podcast producers and show hosts. Do you want to join a podcast network that celebrates all things Italian? At Sentire Media, we understand the allure of Italy and its unique culture. Our devoted team of hosts and producers are all driven by their shared passion for Italy. And we work tirelessly to create the best lifestyle podcasts and content that will whisk you away to the very heart of Italy. With us, you can savor the mouth-watering flavors, get lost in the stories from the past, break down the cultural barriers, and truly immerse yourself in the vibrant traditions of this intoxicating country. If you have a great podcast idea or are already in production and would like to join Sentire Media, head over to sentiremedia.com, that's SENTIRE media.com, and find out how to submit your show.